Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Lincoln Riley, this USC program, late Thursday morning. They are done playing games when it comes to roster construction and talent acquisition. Not only last week going out and landing former Notre Dame general manager Chad Bowden to run the front office for USC going into 2025, we're sitting here Thursday morning and they go out and grab what was Chad Bowden's right hand man at Notre Dame and Dre Brown. Now, Dre Brown for the last year was working with Illinois as their director of personnel, but was formerly working with Chad Bowden at Notre Dame. This is clearly USC giving Chad Bowden really anything he wants to be successful at USC. And I'm a massive fan of it. You know, the USC fans who've been rocking with the fellas the last couple of weeks, as we've talked about the Chad Bowden hire, y'all know the front office for a college football program, at least in my opinion, is becoming one of the most important aspects to get right if you want to win at a national championship level in the landscape of college football. I mean, you look at the recruiting trail, you look at the NIL function, you look at the transfer portal, you look at retaining your roster and keeping your players out of the transfer portal. Roster management, talent acquisition, it's becoming such a complicated and important role for a college football program. If you do not have your ducks in a row in the front office, you are not going to compete for national championships. And it was very clear over the last couple of years that USC did not have that right. I mean, Dave Emmerich and whatever was going on was clearly lack of direction, very not effective. I mean, you look at the USC roster not only in 2024 but in 2023 as well. There were a lot of glaring holes within the roster. There were certain position groups that were not nearly deep enough to compete at the highest level of the Big Ten, to compete at the highest level of college football. They are taking massive steps to fix this going into 2025, and you will see dividends paid out immediately in the 2025 year, but you're going to see this impact over the next couple of years really play a strong role in terms of where this USC program is going. And I think the last thing I like about it before we get into Dre Brown and talk about what he brings to USC is this is in a big time way freeing Lincoln Riley up to go back out and do what he does best. And that is coach football, develop offenses, and develop quarterbacks. It sounded, this is just an outsider looking in at this USC program. To me, how Lincoln Riley talked, it sounded like he had way too much on his plate in terms of off the field stuff, in terms of roster construction. You bring in not only Chad Bowden to kind of be the head of it, but you also bring in kind of his closest assistants from his time at Notre Dame to help him maximize this USC front office. And we all know what this USC program can do when it's maximized. If you can maximize this team, not only in terms of on the football field with the talent level, but if you can maximize this program and how they operate on the recruiting trail in the talent acquisition department, we all know the sky's the limit. And USC is looking to do that with their front office going forward. It was a disaster for the last couple of years. It is hard not to have a ton of confidence that they're getting this thing right going into the 2025 year. And this is probably going to make or break Lincoln Riley's tenure at USC. And what I love most is, hey, we're going to die trying getting this thing right. And we're pulling out all the stops. We're sparing no expense. You go out and make Chad Bowden the highest paid general manager in the country, and then you go out and take Illinois, essentially their GM, and you put him as his right-hand man at USC as well. It's hard not to like what USC has done during this offseason, not only in terms of retaining their coaching staff, right? Keeping Dan Lynn at USC, keeping Doug Belk at USC, bringing in a guy like Rob Ryan, but what they're doing in the front office, this is stuff that's not going to make national media news, but for the USC fans, of which I know there are plenty that like to follow the recruiting trail, this is where you're going to see those dividends get paid off. And we all know this is where it starts. If you want to compete at the highest level of the sport, you got to have the Jimmies and Joes. And USC is sparing no expense in terms of getting this front office right so that USC can put a very talented football team out on the football field every single Saturday afternoon. Now, I want to get into Dre Brown, talk about what he brings to this USC program. Before we get into it, as always, just want to say thank you to you guys and to the USC fans. We got that defensive prospect preview coming out tomorrow on Friday. It was supposed to come out today. Had some things pop up. Got to work through a couple more of those prospects. But we'll put that out tomorrow. Can't thank you guys enough for all the support, and especially to the USC fans who rock with the boys 12 months of a year as we talk about the recruiting trail. Means the world. Appreciate you guys. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Without further ado, let's get into Dre Brown. Now, what stands out to me here about Dre Brown is, yeah, Illinois had a ton of success in 2024, right? You talk about maximizing football program. Illinois was maximized in 2024. Now, how much credit can you give Dre Brown, who is really only there for about 12 months? I don't know, but you can at least say he didn't mess nothing up. He only made it better going into 2024. You can certainly say that. What I love more about it is Chad Bowden knows Dre Brown. Chad Bowden knows what Dre Brown can bring to USC because he worked with him at Notre Dame for the last couple of years. This is obviously a guy that not only Chad Bowden likes, but is very valued as a front office member across the country because Illinois wouldn't have gone out and hired him if they didn't think he was very good either. And so you kind of know you're getting a guy that's a massive asset in terms of this USC front office. And this is becoming really important. You look at the Notre Dame roster that we saw in 2024 that competed for a national championship. Dre Brown, along with Chad Bowden, played a massive role in getting that roster the way it was. And you look at the two differences between Notre Dame and USC lacking depth at a ton of really critical spots in the 2024 year. Clearly a roster that was just not properly built, especially along the lines of scrimmage. I mean, lack of tackle depth. You had to stick Mason Murphy there because you just didn't have any other options. On the defensive line, it was a disaster in terms of the depth. You look at that Notre Dame team in 2024 and how deep they were. I mean, Notre Dame had a ton of crucial injuries. And I know USC fans don't want to necessarily hear me give Notre Dame flowers, but we can just call it as it is. That Notre Dame team dealt with a ton of injuries in the 2024 year, had the depth to overcome those injuries and make the college football playoff national championship. Talk about elite roster management and roster construction. We saw that at Notre Dame, and Dre Brown and Chad Bowden were probably the two guys that played two of the biggest roles in creating that roster. And now they're coming to USC. And again, the last thing there's really two other things that I love about this move. Number one, you hire Chad Bowden. We love that. The next step is, hey, Chad Bowden, what do you need to be as successful as possible with this program? Not only Dre Brown, but I believe last night, Zaire Turner, another very influential Notre Dame personnel department player, is also coming to USC. And so what we're getting at here is USC looked at Chad Bowden and said, hey, what are the things you need to maximize this program, to maximize how you want to operate? And he said, hey, I probably want Zaire Turner. I want Dre Brown. Well, USC goes out and gets him. And then the second thing is now you look at this front office and say you largely just had like Dave Emmerich just throwing stuff at the whiteboard and hoping it sticks. And now it's like we look at it and say this is a really, really strong front office, which is going to help in terms of roster management, but it also takes a ton of pressure off Lincoln Riley in terms of not really having to meddle with that stuff. Say, hey, Lincoln Riley, we hired you because you're a very good football coach. You know how to run really good offenses and develop quarterbacks. Go focus on what we hired you for. We'll take care of the rest. We'll give you the roster that you need to go out and win national championships. You go do the job that we brought you in to do. It took a little bit, and it might still take a little bit. You know, is this team a roster going to immediately become national championship caliber in 2025? We'll see. But you're putting the pieces together for USC to sustain success. This is how it needs to look, and this is how it's starting to look for USC. This is not going to be a ton of the national media news ain't going to cover this, but if you're a USC fan that follows the intricacies of this sport, this is some really big stuff that USC is doing. We'll pause there. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. We got the breakdown of some of those defensive prospects on campus for the junior day coming out tomorrow. Appreciate you guys. We'll talk to y'all later. Peace.